Hey, look who's still alive. Sorry guys, I'm not dead. Despite my best efforts to not be on the internet for the better part of the last month. Thought it's a good time to actually get a live show going again. So welcome everybody to Mosh Racing Live, our what's supposed to be weekly live podcast. It's completely uncensored. Live TV, folks. Live TV. Gotta love it. Alright, so it's been a little while. We've been away for a bit. We're through 10 weeks of the NASCAR Cup Series season. And we have a few things I guess we can kind of talk about in that. Number one, Christopher Bell leading the points. I did not see that coming up to this point. We have 3 drivers with 2 wins that are pretty much guaranteed to be in the playoffs at this point. So you've got Kyle Busch, Kyle Larson, and William Byron, all with 2 wins each. Pretty secure at this point as we have 12 races to go. I'm sorry, 16 races to go in the regular season. I'm thinking fantasy world, what I would be like to have the ideal season. Just finished kind of a crazy weekend at Talladega. So let's talk about that. Number one, and let me find my Talladega scene here. Yep. So Geico 500 at Talladega was a bit of mayhem going through this weekend. I want to start by talking about the Saturday race, the Xfinity Series race, where 2 cars flipped over in quite extreme fashion. And there's a lot of concern at the end of that race with how many cars we continue to flip over, especially in the Xfinity Series. You know, NASCAR has done a lot to slow these cars down. They've put a different package on these, opened up more airways to get air to escape out from underneath the car to stop that pressure vacuum and release air so that these cars won't fly. And what keeps happening in these situations, these cars get turned around, and it's not so much the turning around that's getting them airborne. The car itself, if it turns around, is not going to fly. But in almost every situation that's happened in the last 2 years, a car turns around and then gets hit, and that just knocks them over. And I don't know what you do to fix that. I mean, at the end of the Saturday race, everybody had this extreme amount of concern and alarm for, you know, this being a junkyard, and that's all we're doing is we're trashing cars and we're kind of ruining the way these races are run. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say that because we're not having that problem in the Cup Series. The first time we saw a next-gen car flip over, however, was in the Daytona 500 last year. The 2022 Daytona 500, Harrison Burton got flipped over. And then obviously we saw Chris Buescher at the Coke 600 when he wound up digging into the grass, coming across the front stretch, flipped that car a few times. But how is it that the Cup Series cars are managing to not find themselves in these scenarios? Going into this weekend, there was a lot of conversation about what it's going to look like to see these plate races. I'm sorry, drafting type races. I keep saying plate races. We don't run restrictor plates anymore, and we have not done that for 5 years. Old habits die hard. I still like calling them plate tracks, but obviously that's not what they are. I think the real concern is a lot of the conversation going into this weekend before Talladega is that expect to see what we saw in Atlanta. A lot of 2x2, double file, 2 lanes, running kind of the entire race. Not a lot of opportunity for passing, and that was very true for much of the race. There was very much the double file, 2 lanes racing, not a lot of passing, not a lot of action going on there. But at the same time, you had Eric Jones, who pretty successfully rallied a 3rd lane a couple times. Probably the most interesting moments of the race was the jockeying for positions to get green flag pit stops accomplished. That's where a lot of the ebb and flow of the race kind of happened. But fairly tame first half of the race. Obviously, we got towards the end and things got crazy. 2 situations I think we talk about and address. Number one, Kyle Larson took a hit from Ryan Preece when he got spun. That late restart there, he winds up getting into a 3-ride situation where Ross Chastain just wedged himself into a spot. I mean, in Chastain's defense, he had the position on the 5 car. He was inside of him. The 5 car was just trying to squeeze it and kind of force that move. Maybe force him to back out, force him to go down to the bottom. Wound up getting turned. There just wasn't much that was going to happen with that. But in the mayhem of that crash, Larson gets down onto the apron, winds up coming back up across the racetrack right into Ryan Preece, who just drilled him in the passenger side door. Broke the roll cage of that car. I mean, a hard hit. You heard that impact on TV. It was intense. So, it's kind of a scary situation to see happening, but at the same time, Kyle Larson's okay. But that car took quite a wallop of a hit. Now, in the conversations and things I've seen today, as kind of a result of that, there was a lot of discussion about, thank God that wasn't the driver's side. And the reinforcement on the driver's side apparently is about, what they say is 4 times stronger than the passenger side. But still, something to be addressed. That was a pretty intense hit. Fortunately, everybody walked away from that. Everybody was okay. And fair point to say about Saturday's race too. The 2 incidents that happened there, everybody walked away. No, I'm sorry, I didn't get my notes written up for this because it's been a month since I've done one of these live. But the car that flipped at the beginning, driver was hospitalized, was released. Everything's fine. They kept him for observation, but kind of a crazy situation. Daniel Hemrick towards the end of that race, leading through a late block, winds up getting turned. Just kind of a crazy situation there. Winds up turning that car over, sat upside down for a little while before they were able to get him extracted. But then you go into Sunday, and obviously that hit that Larson took was pretty scary. Glad to see that kind of worked out to his favor. However, we get back into that same discussion we've had about there's 2 schools of thought where, you know, there's too many rules. These cars are too controlled. They're trying to make them too similar. They don't have the freedom to go out and do what they need to do. I've never seen... I didn't start following NASCAR until 1990, so that was well into the restrictor plate era, well past the time of Bill Elliott doing 212 miles an hour at Talladega. Honestly, for me, does it make that much of a difference? You know, that was a big conversation about slowing the cars down at like Michigan and California a few years ago, where instead of going into the corner at 220 or 215, they would maybe go in at 195, and at the end of the day, I didn't see a lot of difference in that. I mean, the way that those races ran and that those races progressed, watching the race, you can't really tell that much of a difference in that speed. And NASCAR's worked really hard to slow these drafting style racetracks down and reduce that. Because even before we switched to the next gen car in the Gen 6 cars, you know, that was the big issue, is you got these huge runs and these huge momentum runs that would come, and they would try to throw the blocks, and that would wind up wadding up too many cars. They were crashing too many cars. Drivers asked for this, and they kind of got what they got. Now, the flip side of that, it doesn't seem like you can pass as easily. The cars get very stagnant and very stalemated by different things in the aero package that slows them down as you get closer to other cars. When I ran this race on Sunday night, I experienced a lot of that, where in practice and even in the race, you know, you could get up to somebody, but I could never quite get to them and actually push their bumper to push another car forward unless they got slowed down by a car in front of them. So, but in that situation, you don't want to be pushing because it's just dangerous. The flip side of that, though, is you have so much more throttle control on these cars now. I was talking about that in a live stream last night when I was running the Geico 500 on iRacing. You know, you're so much more in the throttle, 50-75%, and you're working the throttle pedal, whereas before in the old cars you kept the throttle, you know, under a restrictor plate, you kept the throttle 100% and you just drug the brake. These cars were running, you know, short track brake packages on super speedway cars just to have enough brake pad to get through an entire run of dragging that brake. You know, you carried all that extra weight, but now we have the smaller brake packages because you just don't have to do that the way you used to anymore. So, you know, maybe there's a happy medium in there somewhere. I don't know what it is. I think that drafting style racing is still the same way that it is. It was a little interesting to see. Harrison Burton was a great example of a car that when he got that bump from Noah Gragson going into turn 3 there, just got bumped wrong, got bumped. If you remember back when we were doing the 2-car tandem thing, it was always about you wanted to be underneath of somebody, pushing them kind of on half under the bumper, pushing them on the right rear, and try to keep as much of your grill opening out as possible to keep airflow going into the intake. NASCAR made rule changes to get rid of the 2-car tandem drafting. But now it's the complete opposite. If you hit somebody in the right rear, it tends to turn them around even more, which is what we saw happen to Harrison Burton. Pretty impressive to see him not come back into the field and come across the track. So that was interesting. But anyway, we had that late caution where Kyle Larson gets hit by Priest. That whole situation occurred. Set up what was the final run to the race, where we had an overtime period, green-white checkered. A lot of guys on fuel mileage strategies. Saw Denny Hamlin pit. A lot of guys wound up pitting to try to get enough fuel to make it to the end. Ty Gibbs was one of the cars that coming out at restart actually ran out of gas, or at least stumbled the car trying to get it started and going because of not having enough fuel. That caused some issues. So because he was one of the cars that was out there leading those lines for a long time, and when you're the leader, you're 100% throttle. You're not lifting, and you're not leading back, and you're not saving fuel. So that cost him going into that final restart. So let's talk about that final restart scenario, because there has been nothing but conversation and opinions that have been thrown around all over the internet about that restart. And I just want to say, I don't think we're looking at this in the right light. I think, if I'm being completely honest, I don't sugarcoat that I'm a Bubba Wallace fan, and for whatever reason, actually I know there's a lot of reasons why NASCAR fandom just absolutely hates that guy. Most of those reasons are wrong, and it's because they're just hate change, racist. I don't really care what your reasons are. I've been following that guy for well over 10 years now. I'm not gonna waver from my driver. I was happy to see him make a move to try to win that race. And the one factor nobody's considered in a lot of the conversation today is that the white flag was out. You have to be leading in these drafting style races when the white flag is out. Honestly, if I were Bubba Wallace, in hindsight, where he got a good run and was just pushing the hell out of Kyle Busch going down the backstretch when they were coming to the white, I would have made that move in 3 and 4 or in the tri-oval, coming to the white. I would have gotten ahead of him, and I would have blocked that line, and I would have been trying to play defense. Because I think, honestly, that at this point, the way these races usually tend to finish, once you get the white, the next flag is the race. And more often than not, there's some type of situation that happens where a yellow comes out on that last lap from somebody making an aggressive move. And you wind up being in position to get the win. So I think that Bubba Wallace made the move he had to make at the time he made it to try to be in that position that the next event was going to end that race. However, he was that next event. And I saw it almost right away when he made that move and got out front, made the move around Kyle Busch. He kind of went down to the bottom to block Kyle Busch. Got a little push from Blaney there. And I saw the spark come off the splitter when it drug onto the apron. And right there, because I've done this so many times in iRacing, that if you get that car just a little off canter in that corner where you drag that splitter on the apron and get down a little bit below that yellow line, it gets you so loose that when he was trying to come back up and put that second block on Blaney, it was too late, man. That car was already not planning and was not getting the max coefficient of grip, that when Blaney hit him, there was no way that car wasn't going around. I think it was a bad block. I think it was an unnecessary move. The better move would have been to get down in front of Kyle Busch and let him push you for a minute, because Blaney didn't really have the help. Now, somebody back there was going to mount a charge, get a run together, and they were going to come. And definitely Kyle Busch was going to make the move on Bubba Wallace to try to win that race. Had that thing gotten around to the backstretch, Blaney had the momentum. He would have most likely gotten out there and at least been next to him. If Kyle had pushed the 23, they would have maybe been drag racing down the backstretch. It's hard to say. I mean, we can play armchair quarterback on Monday afternoon here to our heart's content. I still don't think it was a bad move. And I think a lot of people criticize Bubba Wallace for making that move. Or, I'm sorry. I do think it was a bad move, but I think it was a move you had to make given that the white flag was out and you had to at least attempt to be in control of that situation. So, right, wrong, or indifferent, I was happy to see Bubba Wallace at least make a move to try to win the race. They were in contention the majority of the day, and that was impressive. And I'll give him credit, too, that when he got out of the car, he said he did something wrong, that he messed up, that it wasn't the 12's fault. but he knew exactly what he was going for. And in social media today, he said exactly that, you know, in the playoff era, in the world we live in, there's no such thing as a good points day. I mean, it's Ricky Bobby. It's either win the race or die trying, kind of. That's how you have to operate in this environment. And I thought it was a little interesting to see a lot of the people in the comments, because of course we hate Bubba Wallace. We hate everything about him. But all the comments and all the social media is, well, you know, he could have just rode in second and had a good points day. It's like, no, time out. 20 years ago, 2003, we were vehemently against the good points day. Nobody ever wanted to hear that phrase again. We needed more emphasis on wins. That's what birthed the entire scenario of the system we have today, is the demand from you, the fans, that wanted this. You got the playoffs, which originally was the chase, eventually evolved into the playoffs, but there wasn't enough emphasis on getting them to do something in the middle of the race or in the middle of the season. That's where you got stage racing. Your complaints developed the system we have today. So whining and complaining about that somebody is trying to play the best game in the system we have today because they're not just points racing, I mean, pick a fucking lane, guys. Good Lord. It fascinates me that NASCAR fandom finds nothing better to do than complain about the package that is literally developed to appease you. You were the ones who complained about this. We don't like this is like this. We don't like this is like this. So NASCAR fixed it and tried to get it to what you wanted, and now you complain about what you had. I'm fully convinced at this point we could take the cars from 1988, run the entire season in those cars every weekend at North Wilkesboro under the Winston Cup point system, and everybody would complain about it. Because that's what we do as NASCAR, or I'm sorry, that's what you do as NASCAR fans. I love to see the most competitive this sport has ever been. That there is more racing, there are more teams competing for wins. I mean, last year we almost had a record number of wins. We tied the record for most winners in a single season last year. That's exciting to me. I'll agree that the short track package, kind of boring. Does not put on good racing. We didn't see a lot of passing and a lot of racing at Martinsville. We didn't see it so much at Richmond, but we did see it to some extent. I don't think there was anything different from what we've seen in the last 20 years at Martinsville. I mean, maybe it wasn't as aggressive, but it was the same. Get ahead, get some laps led. You'd get some spread on the leaders, and once they would start getting caught up into traffic, other cars would catch them. You know, I think the shifting and the gear ratios that they're running at these tracks gives them a little bit more advantage to not have to do that. But it's still better than what we used to see at Martinsville. I remember the old Martinsville when I first started watching NASCAR back in the early 90s. It was not uncommon to have 3, 4, or 5 cars on the lead lap. The scoreboard, I remember Martinsville only had 5 numbers on it, and every number below it had the minus how many laps, because you could have a leader 2 laps ahead. That is excruciatingly boring to me. This series is more competitive now than it's ever been, and I appreciate that. I enjoy seeing it be competitive. So, Kyle Busch gets the win at Talladega, his second win of the season, his first drafting style, whatever you want to call this, super speedway win in 15 years. That's pretty crazy. You know, I talked about on CeeLo's live stream yesterday that Kyle Busch, not notoriously known as a drafting style driver. To be fair, he was there at the end of Daytona. He was in contention for the Daytona 500 until that late wreck happened. So maybe this is kind of redemption for that. I still don't see Kyle Busch as somebody that I'm ever going to put my bet on for any type of super speedway race, but he was there and he was in it, and he walks away with the win. You could say he stole it, but he was in position. He did the right thing. Me personally, I picked Brad Keselowski to win that race because his spotter TJ Majors is the best drafting style racer in the NASCAR world, anywhere, hands down. Nobody is better at this type of racing than TJ Majors. You look at the career of wins that he had with Dale Earnhardt Jr., Brad Keselowski, and Joey Logano. I mean, the guy knows how to do this. He knows how to put his driver in position to contend for these things. Brad Keselowski played the lay-in-the-back strategy the majority of the day. up until the very end, he made his way up there. He showed up at the end, was right where he needed to be, until that Bubba Wallace move wound up getting him damaged. But even with that, he still walks away with a top 5. So that was my pick. Didn't quite pan out. I have proverbially been a Ryan Blaney fan when it comes to any of these super speedways. I picked him for the Daytona 500 because he's usually really good there. He did not show up this year in the 500. He was right there at the end of this thing. Had that race continue to go green, Blaney probably would have been a contender. He would have been right there. So interesting race, all things considered. I thought it was a good Talladega race. That was the highest attended Talladega race since 2008. So that's pretty impressive to see that we're starting to get people back at Talladega. And the infield was packed. You know, they've added more camping sites in the infield along the backstretch, and you're getting attendance at Talladega. Maybe it's not in the stands, but people are going to that race. So much so that I plan to go there in the fall. I definitely want to buy my campsite and tickets to go back to Talladega in the fall. It's been about 5 years since the last time I went to a race there, so I would love to get back to Talladega. Let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about some news. One big thing that came out today that I'm kind of excited about, actually. So NASCAR has been adding to their list of the 75 all-time greatest drivers in the NASCAR Cup Series, or in NASCAR, not necessarily just in the Cup Series. They did this for the 50th anniversary of NASCAR in 1998. Now here we are 25 years later. So they're adding to that list. And it's been kind of interesting to see when you start to try to think about the best 25 drivers of the last 25 years, who really fits that mold. Goes without saying that drivers like Jimmy Johnson, Jeff Gordon, easily fit onto that list. But when we stop looking at the championship winners and the all-time race winners, and you start kind of peeling back to other people in the sport who deserve to be on that list, Corey LaJoie was added on there for his multiple then Busch Series championships. Jeff Burton added in there. I thought that was a really good pick. Denny Hamlin just got added to that. And Denny Hamlin, I think, absolutely, of the last 25 years, one of the best drivers when it comes to wins, top 5s, being there in contention. I don't think a championship necessarily has to put you on this list. I think there's a lot of drivers that don't have a championship that absolutely deserve to be on that list. Mark Martin's already there, so we don't really need to talk about him because going into 1998 and the 50, he was already on that list. Nothing really gets added there. But the one I was really excited about to see today, Carl Edwards. Carl Edwards absolutely deserves to be on that list, and I miss Carl Edwards. He was probably one of my favorite drivers when he really came on hard. Got in that 99 car at the end of 2004. Going into 2005, I started following Carl Edwards quite extensively. I was, obviously a Dale Jr. fan, but Carl Edwards was my backup guy, and I was really a fan of his. I liked seeing him win races. He was a great person to talk to. I met him personally. He came into Las Vegas when I worked there, just after he had bought his jet. So had the opportunity to kind of talk with him a little bit about flying and racing and all the things. And yeah, really enjoyed Carl Edwards. So to see him make the list of the top 75 drivers in NASCAR, I think that's a fair pick too. If you think about that late 2000s, 2005 to 2012, I mean, Carl Edwards was part of the story. You got to figure that, came down to a tie in the 2011 championship race between him and Tony Stewart. Tony led more laps than him to win that championship. Otherwise, Carl would have won that. And that was really cool. You think about the wins that he had during that period. One of my favorites I'll never forget is that time that him and Jimmy Johnson were going forward at Kansas. And he was behind Johnson and just sailed it into 3 like, screw it. I got to try something here. I have to win this race. Sailed it into 3, took the lead, wound up bouncing off the wall in 4, damaged the car. Jimmy Johnson sails right back by him to go on to the win. But it was almost what everybody has revered as the Hail Melon from Martinsville last year. Carl Edwards tried that in 2008 and almost pulled it off. And man, what a story it would have been if he did. So pretty interesting to see Carl Edwards on that list. I'm excited. Other notables, Greg Biffle added to that list. I think if you look at the early 2000s, Greg Biffle and that 16 car, they were a force. They got out there and won some races, and they were part of the conversation. I think, you know, they're going to continue to announce 5 drivers a week, every week. Jeff Burton was announced yesterday during the broadcast that he was going to be included in that list. I thought that was a cool pick too. I remember there was a year, I think we went to 5 different races one year that Jeff Burton won. Really pretty stout there for a period of the early or late 90s, early 2000s. I remember getting $1 million lug nuts from Jeff Burton when he won the Noble 5 at Darlington during a race that got rain shortened. Got to go down on the track, pick up some of the Noble $5 that they threw out of the bank truck at the car, went down to his pit stall and picked up some of the lug nuts from his stall. So actually in my NASCAR jacket that I wear to the race, my Dale Jr. jacket, I still have one of those lug nuts in the pocket. So that's my $1 million lug nut that I got from Jeff Burton's car on that race. I believe that was 1999, 98 or 99. I'd have to go back and look, but yeah, got to stand right there while they were doing victory lane in the garage area at Darlington. That was pretty cool. So yeah, a lot of history obviously in picking the 75. They'll culminate that as they get to Throwback Weekend in Darlington here in a few weeks. Some interesting races coming up. So we go, now that we're done with Talladega, we go Dover, Kansas, Darlington, and that's going to lead us into All-Star Week when we get to go to North Wilkesboro, back to North Wilkesboro for the first time since 1996. I'm pretty excited about that. I think that's going to be a good race. Looking at the pictures of the track and to see how new everything on that track looks, you know, they've added safer barriers, they've redone the retaining wall, they're building all new catch fence, they've refurbished all the suites and things like that, freshened up the seats, paved the entire infield, repaved the pit road, put new concrete down, but the only thing that remains the same is the old asphalt that has been there since the 90s around the racetrack. That it just looks funny to see how everything looks new except for that, and the Victory Lane building. I don't know if you guys are familiar with North Wilkesboro, but the media center in the middle of the track actually has a lift that they pick the car up to roll it into Victory Lane on the roof. So that's going to remain there. And some of the look and feel of the outside of the racetrack, the old NASCAR Winston Cup Series banner that was painted on the wall, they're leaving that. There's certain things around the racetrack that from a nostalgia feel they're leaving in place, and I think that's really cool. I think that's a good way to do it. You're going to tie the old and the new in together. There was obviously a Goodyear tire test there a few weeks ago. Chris Buescher, Austin Dillon, and Tyler Reddick participated in that test. So pretty neat to see next-gen cars on the track at North Wilkesboro. Yeah, I'll be honest, when North Wilkesboro went away, I wasn't as upset as the rest of NASCAR fandom. I understood the move at the time, why NASCAR made it. Wilkesboro was a dying market. You know, NASCAR was really in that mass expansion in the late 90s, early 2000s, looking for bigger markets with infrastructure, hotels, ways to get people to come to the event. I'll say that I agree that maybe some of the fan base was lost in that, or the long-term fan was lost in that. It was a gamble that at the time it paid off. You know, that got us California, that got us Las Vegas, Phoenix expanding to 2 races, Chicago. You know, there were so many tracks that we got added in that period. But I think the goal of reaching some of these new markets and new demos, what we forgot about is, you know, for me, experiencing a weekend at a racetrack was always about just that, the weekend. It wasn't about going to just the race and watching the race. It was about spending the weekend camping at the track or near the track and the conversations you had with other people. That to me is my favorite part. I can't wait for Nashville Super Speedway coming up here in a couple months, because I get to do exactly that. I get to go take my camper out to the track, park out there on a racetrack, and talk about race cars. And I get to talk trash with people who are going to sit here and bag on me because I have a Bubba Wallace flag flying above my camper. And I can't wait for it. I am so excited to have those conversations, because I can fundamentally disagree with somebody about my driver, but at the end of the day, we all respect each other and we enjoy that. And that's what I love about going to these races, is the ability to just have those conversations and stand around and talk about our history with the sport. You know, I came into the sport when I was 7 years old. This is the first time I went to a race in Daytona in 1990. I've been around to see things. You know, I said on the stream yesterday, I was there in Daytona in 1994 when Jimmy Spencer and Ernie Irvan were banging doors. Jimmy Spencer beat Ernie Irvan. I was there during Mr. September when Harry Gant won 5 races. I went to one of those races in 1991 in Dover. You know, I was there for the heat of the Dale Earnhardt Rusty Wallace feud between those two cars. So I've seen so many things in this. Nowhere into where he's at now. You know, I was there for that. So all right, let's move on. We're gonna get down to this weekend coming up in the Worth 400 at Dover Motor Speedway. This will be our first concrete track of the 2023 season, week number 11 in the NASCAR Cup Series campaign. I say it's our first concrete track because we put a bunch of dirt on Bristol a few weeks ago. I do have to say, we didn't do anything about the Bristol dirt race before we get into this. That was actually a pretty good race. I was not impressed with the Bristol dirt track the first year, especially because if you remember that race, the Saturday events they tried to do with that track, the track was just too muddy and it was caking up everything on the trucks when they tried to run the heat races for the trucks. Couldn't do it. Wound up canceling everything. They started the field on points. Rained all day Sunday. Didn't have the race on Sunday. They wound up racing both races Monday. The trucks first, and then the Cup cars ran after that. By the time the Cup cars got on the track, that track was so dry, it was so hard packed that it didn't race like a dirt track at all. I mean, it was essentially watching them race on a concrete track or a clay track. I mean, it just didn't work right. Didn't go the way it was supposed to. And 2 races on that surface in a day, and they couldn't stay ahead of it. Fast forward to 2022, they kept having rain issues in that race, so it kept stalling and delaying the race from getting going. Little bit better surface conditions because there was moisture built into it, but I thought this year they did a very good job of managing the surface, managing the moisture, managing the track. I thought it was real interesting. You know, at one point there was this huge divot in the middle of 3 and 4, and they weren't trying to fix that. That was just part of it. Like, hey, that naturally occurred in a dirt track. I think the only thing that, you know, if we were talking about a true dirt track, you're not going to get to a point where you're just packing it against concrete and then you have nowhere else to go. You're going to have more flex when there's soil underneath the racing surface. But overall, I thought that was a really good race. It was nice to see a dirt track racer and Christopher Bell win that race, racing hard with Kyle Larson and Tyler Reddick, who are all kind of dirt track background guys. That was a good race to watch. I'm still curious to see if we're going to do that again next year. That has not been announced yet. I still think I was very opposed to the dirt race idea to begin with. I felt like, especially for Bristol, it was very much just a gimmick to do something to try to get people to come to that spring race, because nobody came to the spring race anymore. Again, the fall race gets more attendance because of the environment. It's not so much about the race, although the race is fun, the race is good, but when I can camp at that track and after a Saturday night race go back to my camper and let the party cut loose a little bit, that's the fun part of that event. And I think that's why you see more attendance in the fall race than the spring race. Bristol went with a gimmick to try to get people to come to the spring race, and if you ask me, it flopped. I don't think it was a good idea to put dirt on this track. I was very opposed to NASCAR running a dirt race for the Cup Series. But now that we've done it, and we've kind of got it a little bit more successful, especially with this next-gen car, I didn't think that was going to work at all. But this was a good race. I thought that was a good race, and I thought I'd still like to see them go to an actual dirt track, though. Rather than trying to make Bristol into a dirt track, go to a real dirt track. Although, I will say, at the end of that race, when the dirt guys who come from a dirt background are complimentary of the way that that track runs and races, and it races like a real dirt track, that gives me more buy-in as a fan to say, okay, if dirt guys are approving of this, then maybe I can be into it. Yeah, so that's where I guess I sit on Bristol. I still feel like, yeah, Bristol's not what it ever used to be. But I think it's better. I think that the fans are wrong on this one. You know, yes, it is not the 36-degree half-mile bull ring that it used to be. It's more progressive bank. There's more option for passing, although last year's rules package at Bristol didn't produce a lot of racing necessarily. The reason I went to Bristol for the first time in 2012 is because I watched that race in the spring where Brad Keselowski and Matt Kenseth sat there racing side by side for the lead for an hour and a half, and I was like, wow, this is the best Bristol race I've ever seen. I went right online and bought my tickets for the fall race as soon as that was over, so I was very excited about that. The old Bristol conveyor belt with a wreck every 15 laps, yeah, I hated that. It wasn't fun to watch. It wasn't, you know, I mean, I guess that's why people liked it so much, but yeah, I'm not here to watch people wreck other people, you know, and tempers flare. Sure, there have been some great moments in the sport that have come out of that. Bobby Labonte, Dale Earnhardt, twice. But that's not what I'm looking for. So to see cars actually be able to battle on that racetrack, to me, was a better selling point. Putting dirt on it, I didn't like it. I didn't like it, but it produced a better race on the dirt track at Bristol this year than it did last fall on the concrete, so maybe that's the way to go. Speaking of concrete, back to the whole reason we're having this conversation, this weekend's Worth 400 at Dover Motor Speedway. The Monster Mile. Do we still call it that? I guess we do. Remember when the first race I went to in Dover was 1991. It was still asphalt, so it was the Monster Mile then. But it didn't, and the monster used to look like Godzilla. It was like a big lizard. That was the monster. And it wasn't until they repaved that track and made it concrete, then it was White Lightning. I don't know if anybody remembers that marketing campaign. After they did that in 1995, it was White Lightning is how they campaigned that racetrack. Interestingly enough, that track has not been resurfaced since 1995. I think it's had some grinding and things done to it, but still, concrete surface from, geez, what is that, 28 years ago? So that's pretty crazy. Some staying power in concrete, I guess. But the track, you know, now we have Miles the Monster is the big concrete guy that looks like the big abominable snowman from Frozen. That's what he looks like to me. But he's always sitting out there holding a car. So, yeah, they've made that track kind of interesting. What I will say about Dover from the iRacing world is I absolutely hate it. Dover's a track I have run very well at in iRacing. It's a track that I adapt to very well. I've found ways to have really, really good long run speed at Dover. The problem with Dover is that the front stretch is so narrow, there's no apron, or there's no escape, and then the back stretch is even more narrow because you've got the horse track that's in the center of the racetrack there. So for the casino, and when somebody wads it up coming off of those corners, because the way those cars, like, you know, normally when you come off a corner, you're coming out of the banking, you kind of come down a hill into the straight. Well, the way Dover's built, you almost go up into the way the banking is on the straights there. You almost kind of come up out of the banking, and your car does this weird lift and kind of offloads and then reloads as you come up out of there from the transition from the turn into the straight. It is very easy to snap loose coming off at 2 or 4. And generally when that happens, cars wind up spinning, they go down, they plow into that inside wall, and then they come right back up the track into traffic. And it's really hard not to get involved in that, because even if you can get yourself slowed down and somehow dodge that, you got all these guys behind you that wind up plowing into you. So Dover almost has more unpredictability to me than some of these super speedways because of specifically that. You can have a great run going, but guys in 30th start wadding it up, and next thing you know, you're piled into their wreck when it had nothing to do with you. So from the iRacing world, I cringe when we go to Dover, but it is a good track. When it comes to the Cup Series, it's really tough for me to kind of remember who's good here. You know, when I think Dover, I think Jimmy Johnson. They won so many races there. So that's where I kind of go to, as I expect to see the Hendrick cars do well. Chase Elliott's had some success there in the last few years, but it also seems like the Gibbs Toyotas show up there a lot. So tough to say where I would go if I had to try to pick a winner for this weekend at Dover. If I'm going to lob one out there, I'm going to say Denny Hamlin. I don't have really any backing to that, but I think Denny Hamlin and the Toyotas tend to show speed at Dover. Toyotas were very strong at Nashville last year. And I know that's a weird comparison to make, but actually Nashville and Dover, from the concrete oval perspective, are a lot more similar than they are different. Obviously Nashville's longer, a little bit different layout, a lot slower cornering speed or tighter cornering speed, a lot more braking in the cornering in Nashville. But yeah, they really, from that perspective, are kind of similar in the way that you have to manage tires on a concrete racetrack. And I feel that the Toyotas last year at Nashville had that on lock. Now, Chase Elliott wound up winning the race last year in Nashville. The year before that was Kyle Larson, so it looks like Hendrick's got the whole Nashville thing figured out. And in the long run, they absolutely do. But Dover, to me, I still just look at the Toyotas as kind of having a little bit of an edge there. The other side of that, too, for whatever reason, whoever was in the 43 car always seemed to do really well there. When A.J. Allmendinger was in that car, he ran really well. Bubba Wallace had some decent runs there when he was in that car. Almirola, when he was in the 43 car, had some decent runs there. So, yeah, I wonder if there could be a little bit of a one-off kind of thing that happens. But if I had to lob a guess out there today on who's going to be good at Dover, I'm going Denny Hamlin as my first pick. I would back that up probably with a Hendrick car. So I'm looking Kyle Larson, William Byron. I'm hesitant to say Chase Elliott, although I think Chase Elliott is probably going to be better than them. Still recovering from injury, broken leg in the snowboarding accident. Chase Elliott has been good at Dover in the last few years, so I think I would expect him to do well. I guess Dover is a very taxing racetrack, though, in the way that you have to manage that racetrack while you're racing on it. It puts some forces on your body. You know, you were in G, getting pressure in those corners a lot, and those corners are long at Dover. You spend way more time in the corners than you do on the straightaways, and even on the straightaways you've got that kind of banking and the way the car just loads coming in and out of the corners. Yeah, see a lot of guys that get exhausted at Dover. I remember Kyle Petty winning there in '95 and like having to get oxygen and everything when he got out of the car in victory lane. So I guess that's what I'm thinking is Chase Elliott. You know, he said that he's fine. He's getting the car, but you know, leg gets stiff every now and then, and he's got some soreness, so maybe that's the thing. Maybe, I don't know. Yeah, I'm going to stick with Denny Hamlin. That's going to be my pick. Let's say William Byron is my backup to that. And if I had to pick a long shot, and I don't really know that I'd call it a long shot, Christopher Bell. Christopher Bell has been impressive this year. Honestly, he leads the regular season points right now. In the driver standings, so you know he's very good there. Alex Bowman, that's another one I wanted to think of too. He's had a decent year, although he's fallen off a little bit. He started this year leading the regular season points, just a string of top tens, very consistent. Kind of fallen off, but been a little bit in the quiet and in the background. But I still think Alex Bowman shows up. I expect him to win a Dover or a Pocono. That's kind of the places he tends to appear and do something. So yeah, I'm going to stick with Denny Hamlin as my pick for this week, though. So if you guys think of something different, put that in the chat here. Let me know. And yeah, let's see how that goes. All right. I think it's time we'll probably wrap this one up. We didn't have any topics this week just because, again, it's been a little while since we've done a live show. It's good to get back into this, though, and just kind of get broadcasting again. Before we wrap it up completely, let's talk about my iRacing Talladega race real quick, which just sucked. Again, another good super speedway race for me where I had a good run. I had a good race going. Led some laps, was out front, ran in the top 10 the whole race. Got a bad push there towards the end, wound up damaging the car, then got wrecked by a lap car turning across my nose. Wound up 15th, 5 laps down, which just sucks, man. It sucks to run that good and then have something like that happen. But you know, onward and upward. Overall, I had MyPilotPro on the car again. So I've got a 10th and a 15th in that car so far this year. This week, if we run Dover, I don't know that I'm actually going to have any opportunity to race at Dover this week, just because my schedule, obviously I'm on the road this week. I'm in Detroit, Michigan right now. And then when I do get back home, this weekend's pretty packed. So I don't know that I'll actually get to race Dover this week. If I do, it'll probably be Sunday night if I get to race there, but that's all going to depend on what's going on during the day. So yeah, overall, I don't know that I'll get to race Dover, but after that, I'll definitely be at Kansas. I will absolutely be racing at Kansas. I won my last race at Kansas during the off season. Well, I was not credited with the win because I was ahead of the pace car. There was a late caution that came out. I got up, took the lead. Somebody wrecked behind me. Yellow came out, and I didn't slow down enough to let the pace car get in front of me before I crossed the finish line. I was credited with like 13th. So, but I won that race. So Kansas is a great track for me, though. I've had some really, really good runs there. I'm looking forward to that one. Darlington after that, I have not revealed my throwback yet for Darlington, so I need to get that up. I need to get that rendered and get some pictures of that car out there, let you guys check it out. I think it's pretty cool. But yeah, looking forward to Darlington. Follow me on all the socials. All my links are right here. Of course, I'll be doing some more content coming very soon on Wiehl and Sky for all of our aviation themed content. I'm getting ready to film quite the event over the next few days this week. So I'll be putting some content together for that. Of course, you can follow me at Mosh Racing here on YouTube, on Facebook. That's where you're going to find all of my racing content, everything here. Going to be back in the standard proof car here in the next few weeks. Looking forward to that. Real quick shout out, as always, MyPilotPro. Thanks them for sponsoring this video, sponsoring my race car. Custom GoPro mounts, go check them out. There's a link down here in the description where you can pick up your very own custom mounts, put them to use, put your action cameras to use. They make some really cool stuff. Most of it, again, is aviation themed. That's where this all really started, but they've got everything for outdoors, marine, sport, all that stuff. Go check it out. Take a look at them. Click on the link in the description. Pick up whatever you want to buy. Appreciate everybody for joining us. Once again, I'm sorry we've not been consistent with these. It's just kind of been a whirlwind of travel and being on the road and not having an opportunity to sit down and actually film this and talk through a lot of things. I'm a very opinionated guy when it comes to racing. I've got a lot of background and understanding and history in this sport. Obviously, as somebody who drives these cars in iRacing, I'm very familiar with the handling and the characteristics of what these cars do. And I love to speak to that. But the thing that makes this fun is your guys' participation. So make sure you're hitting all that subscribe stuff and the bell and whatever. I hate having to sit here in these videos and like, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, blah, blah. I feel like such a hack doing that. I do this because it's fun. I love to talk racing. And I love to talk racing with people. So it's fun for me when you guys are in here and talking racing with me. But it's just as fun when you reach out to me afterwards or you find me at the racetrack and we talk about it in person. I'm going to close it out on that. Thanks everybody for watching. Again, probably not going to be doing much race streaming this week. But we'll be hopefully live next Monday night again. I'm moving this from Wednesday to Monday. I think it's a little better to do it kind of the day after the race so we can have some of that real-time reaction stuff. We can talk about it a little bit while it's still fresh in our minds. So yeah, let's see how Dover goes. Let me know who your race picks are. I'm sticking with Denny Hamlin. That's going to be my horse for this weekend, I guess. So CeeLo will be proud. He'll be excited to hear that I'm pulling his horse. But appreciate everybody's time. We'll see you guys on the next one.